next meeting. So we'll be able to have live audio, live video for those who are remoting in to the meetings. But of course, we always welcome folks here at the McGowan Auditorium because it is great to see folks that have a live engagement. So again, welcome again. Today we have, again, 4 speakers. Don Rosen, the Director of Policy Analysis and Enforcement, and Lawrence Brewer, the Director of the National Records Management Program. They'll be leading off, talking about updates on the managing government records. Jeff Lunsford, the Chief Financial Analyst for the Federal Records Center program, will give a preview, very much a work in progress, of rate development for fiscal 15. And Gary Rackhouse, the new Director of the Records Management Training Program, will introduce himself to all of you and talk about some of his strategies for the program as it moves forward. But again, first off, we're going to start off with Don and Lawrence, so let me welcome them to the podium.
I'll go first. Okay. All right, good morning. So this morning, Lawrence and I are going to talk about some of the reporting requirements coming out of the directive. I'm going to talk about the records management self-assessment and the senior agency official reports. They're not finalized, but kind of give you an idea of where they're at, some just kind of preliminary numbers as we work to wrap those up. And then Lawrence is going to talk about some of the stuff we did with the spreadsheets and provide some data on that. So I'm going to go first, and then I will turn it over to Lawrence. But once again, I want to welcome everyone from coming. It certainly was an interesting week with all the traffic. I actually today took the Silver Line for the first time as I live out in Loudoun County. So if those who are interested, actually went pretty smoothly, although you should allow yourself some extra time. Parking garages are pretty deep, and it takes about almost an hour to get here. So if you're going to look at using that, plan accordingly. One actually policy note I do want to make before I start. We actually have from the policy team, we have our metadata guidance is close to being done. We actually have the draft is completed, and we're actually sending it out for comments probably by the end of this week or early next week. So we're going to open it up for a 2-week period of time. It's going to be posted on our Records Express blog. So if you're interested in metadata, we welcome your comments. So please check that out, and it'll be on our Records Express blog within the next few days. So with that, we'll get started. Let me just make sure we have our slides. So as I mentioned, I'm going to talk about the findings from the records management self-assessment and our senior agency official reports. So for the 2013 records management self-assessment, just a little bit of background. As you know, the RMSA gets lots of great interest from the records management community at large, from the agencies, from OMB, from Congress, from the press. It really is one of our big compliance tools out there. It generates lots of interest. Every time that goes out, people point to that, and it really is a barometer that we use to measure how agencies are doing. So the 2013 report is just about done. We're just kind of wrapping it up, going through some review processes, but we anticipate it being available very soon. But I'd like to point out, you should have received your scores in May. So if you've not received your scores, contact me or contact Cindy Smolovic, who oversees our oversight team, and we'll make sure you get them. But you should have received them several months ago. So hopefully everyone has their scores and knows how well they did this year. So in terms of what were the initial results from the RMSA 2013, first thing I'd like to point out is we had fantastic response rate, over 96%, which is our best ever. For a little context, last year I think we were at 85, 86%, so significant uptick, so that's fantastic. So thanks to all of you for getting that done and getting it in. That's really great response rate for us. It's definitely our best ever. Also good to report that the numbers are getting better. We actually increased. We now actually have more in the low risk than the high risk. Going back to when we started this back in 2009, 29% of the agencies were now in the low risk category, 43% in moderate, and 28% still in the higher risk. So still work to be done, but the numbers are inching higher up. So I think that's good. We are all making progress, and some agencies have gotten themselves in really good shape according to the numbers. So granted, it is just one measurement of your program, but the numbers are showing increases and improvements, so that is good to see. Here is kind of a different snapshot of where things were from last year to this year. As I mentioned, scores are up. 52% of the agencies, their scores went up, so that's really good. 18% went down. So, and some of those were small. Some of them were a little bit, significant. Some were not. And 24% stayed the same. And also, we had 6% responding for the first time, which of course led to our increased overall participation rate. So overall, I think that was good, showing that over half the agencies had their scores go up this past year. This is a pretty interesting graphic where we are. Now, we've been doing the RMSA now for 5 years. We started in 2009 as a pilot. So the numbers it's hard to look at 2009 to 2010 because we changed the question significantly because it was a pilot and we kind of made some tweaks to it. So really, I like to look at the data from 2010 to 2013, and you can see how we've made some progress. 2010, only 5% of the agencies were in low risk. And now looking at our 2013 preliminary data, looks like almost 29%. So significant continuing progress up. And also, going the other extreme, we had 46% in the high risk when we did it in 2010, and it's now down to 28%. So that's good direction. Of course, the moderate range has really pretty much stayed the same, 49%, now 43%. So as I said, the report is essentially done, so these numbers are not likely going to change. I think we're pretty good with where the data holds right now. So just general results. The areas we found we were strongest, program activities and disposition areas, agencies seem to be doing really well based on the data received. Weaknesses, and obviously we have lots and lots we need to continue to work on, especially when it comes to the Managing Government Records Directive. Electronic records management continues to be an area that we need to continue to work on and make progress in the area. We are seeing the agencies are getting a little better with internal controls, performance measures, doing things like standard operating procedures and metrics, but not necessarily testing. I will say one project that we are working on that hopefully will help with this is our maturity model project that I mentioned briefly, I think at a past BRIDG meeting. And we are actually, I have a group of people from the Federal Records Council been working collectively to develop a maturity model tool. We actually almost have something done. So I think by the next BRIDG meeting, I'll be able to talk about that. We have some plans how we want to roll that out. So I think that'll be another tool to help with compliance. So I think that's an area that might be useful too, and we'll talk about that at future meetings. So again, overall, the trends were positive. I think we're seeing some good things, but lots of work still remains for all of us, especially in the areas of electronic records management. Moving ahead, a question I've been getting quite a bit in the last few weeks is where we stand with the 2014 RMSA. I should mention we are updating the questionnaire, not significantly, but we always look at it from year to year to add in new questions. Like, for example, last year, we added in some questions about email. We'll probably add some new questions on different topics this year. The oversight team is considering having some focus groups. We haven't nailed that down. If we were going to do that, I imagine we're going to do it pretty quickly. We will provide advanced copies of the questionnaire in Word and PDF formats like we did last year. One exciting change for us is we actually just procured a new survey tool. So we've been using SurveyMonkey for the last few years, and we've moved to a new tool, which I think will be easier for you guys, easier for us. It's going to allow us to crank out the report a little bit faster than we probably have in the past too, because it really lends itself to that. And so we're in the process of getting that set up, getting our questions loaded in. So, if you are going to have any changes to your link, still use that same email address, rmselfassessment@nara.gov. So we are working to get that done. Be on the lookout for any announcements about focus groups for questions if you're interested in participating in that. And we will have the questionnaires out in advance of when the RMSA goes out, as we have in the past. So that's what we're doing for 2014. And I should point out, we don't have the launch date set yet when we're going to do that. We are still working on figuring out the timing of when we're going to have it for 2014. But it likely will be similar time frame to last year, but we're still working that out. So with that, I'm going to switch gears to the SAO reports. These are the Senior Agency Official Reports that we had you do at the same time. For those who had to do those, as the RMSA, and we opened up one big reporting window, which I think was October 22nd to the end of January. So it was the first ever senior agency official reports. And those reports looked at 3 different things related to the directive, how we were doing on goal 1.1, managing all records electronically by the end of the decade. Goal 1.2, managing our email by the end of 2016. And we also wanted to know how agencies were doing in terms of managing cloud computing services. So the SEO reports really focused on 3 different areas, and it was essentially a narrative report. So as I mentioned, it was our first ever senior agency official report. We received over 100 reports, and in many cases, some agencies chose to do it at the agency level, and some actually submitted reports at the component level. So we received kind of a mix there, but over 100 reports and well over 1,000 pages of information came in. So lots and lots of data that we got to receive, to look at, to analyze. It was really quite an interesting task and challenge there. So the process we set up is we set up an internal NARA working group, which was led by Preston Huff, who many of you might know from leading our project management office when the directive first kicked off. And we also had members of our compliance team and other members of our agency or Office of Chief Records Officer organization to look at all this information. We spent many weeks and months combing through all the data, looking for analyzing it for trends, progress, challenges, seeing how agencies were going about implementing their plans for the directive. And we wanted to look at the information, look at the challenges, see where the gaps were, just really get a good picture of how agencies were doing as we approached year 1 of the directive. So we've got lots of good information, and we're organizing that information now and putting it into some type of report form that we can share. This is a kind of an interesting graphic here. One of the questions we asked was challenges agencies face when they're doing the SEO report. And of course, not surprisingly, out of all 107 reports received, everyone said budget. So it was a challenge. And then it kind of varies from there. 26 said conflicting priorities. 50 people said IT issues. Some said lack of standards. So we got lots of different reasons, lots of different challenges that agencies face as they're working towards implementing the goals in the directive. So this was pretty interesting data for us. And we also tried to take some of the information, some of the narratives, and kind of somewhat make some quantitative analysis of it in terms of how we thought agencies were progressing as well. So lots of good information that we received. So kind of what are our next steps, what we're going to do? We are going to finalize both the RMSA and the SEO reports. As I mentioned, we hope to finalize both in the next few weeks, and then of course have to go through a review process, but I think we're pretty close. And then we're also shifting gears to work on the template for next year. I've gotten many questions already about when that's coming. We are working on it. That's one of my top priorities to have that done. I will tell you that right now our thinking is it might not be a narrative like it was this past year. I think we'd go more towards like a quantitative tool, sort of measure how you're doing towards email, how you're doing towards 2019. We also are going to probably ask questions, trying to obtain best practices. So we are working on getting that template finalized. Hopefully we do that in the next few weeks. And of course, we'll send it out in advance as we did last year as well. We're also working on getting ready, as I mentioned, for the RMSA, loading our questions into our new tool and getting ready for that. And then we will launch our 2014 reporting period. I don't have the dates nailed down. We're working with the senior management on that, but as soon as we have that, we will announce it very soon. So that's where we are with the self-assessment and the SEO reports. As I said, lots of good data for us, and we look forward to sharing it very soon. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Lawrence, and we'll do questions, I guess, at the end for both of us.
Might need my glasses to do this.
Pardon me. Would it be possible to dim the lights in front of the slide? It's hard to read.
Can we dim the lights a little bit on the stage area? There we go.
So good morning. I am Lawrence Brewer, and I oversee the teams that are working on Directive Requirements 2.2 and 2.5. I'll explain what those are a little bit more on the next slide. First, I just wanted to say what I'm going to try and do today is, because of the difficult situation we're in, where some people are just on the phone and those of you who are in the room, I'm going to try, for the benefit of the people on the phone, to explain what's on the slide. There are some graphics. I know they're going to be difficult to explain, but I'm going to try and at least convey what the graphics represent. And for those of you in the room, congratulations to the intrepid few of you who made it out here. It's actually a bigger crowd than I expected. But I hope you're enjoying the elbow room. For those of you, I ask you to bear with me because I'm probably going to read the slides a little bit more than I would normally do, but I want to make sure that the folks on the phone get the full message that we're trying to talk about here today. So what we are going to do in general is give you some general idea of the preliminary findings of the two project teams that we're going to talk about. We've received the data. We've done some preliminary statistical analysis on the data. And we wanted to give you a sense of where we are right now and what we're going to be doing next with the data that you submitted to us. One thing we wanted to be sure about is that you did not think that all of this data that you sent with the RMSA went into some black hole in College Park and never to be seen again. So we want to assure you that we appreciate the data that you have submitted, and we are actively working on it, and it's certainly going to inform what we're going to be doing in FY15 in terms of following up with you, the agencies, and internally with our stakeholders who have a connection to the data that has been reported. Okay, good. So, as I said, the focus is on Directive Requirements 2.2 and 2.5 that are in NARA OMB M1218. So 2.2 is our shorthand for permanent records that are in agency custody and in the FRC system that are 30 years old or older. So if you remember back from the RMSA, there were two spreadsheets that were submitted for this requirement. Part A covered records that were in the FRC system, and we provided that information back to you. And Part B was the spreadsheet that you were asked to fill out that provided the data on those records 30 years old or older in your custody. The 2.5 requirement is the report on unscheduled records. And again, it also had a Part A and a Part B, where Part A represented unscheduled records in the FRC system that we were able to generate out of ARCIS, and a Part B spreadsheet that we asked you to fill out in covering the various electronic and other media unscheduled records in your custody. So a little bit of a refresher on the process. So we sent out the templates as part of the RMSA. They were sent out on May 28th, and we were trying to make it easier by having you submit it as an attachment to the RMSAs. And I think that worked for the most part. We didn't get quite the response that Don mentioned in terms of the 96% on the RMSAs. We didn't get 96% of the spreadsheets. And we did allow for some follow-up. So, as you all recall, the furlough extended the deadline. So we initially had a deadline of January 31st. We then extended it with some reminders to the end of February to make sure we can get as much data in as we could. So where we are right now, as I said, we are still reviewing the data. We're developing some statistics, and I'll share a lot of those stats with you in a minute. We are working on a report, and we have draft reports from both teams that have some follow-up actions that we need to review internally. I'll give you a sense of a couple of those actions so you can get an idea of where we're headed. We do expect for both of these reports, so for the unscheduled records, this replaced the previous biannual e-records reporting that we used to do in previous years. So now that has been incorporated into this activity, so we will expect to repeat the unscheduled records as part of the RMSA in next year and years to come. The 30-year-old or older permanent records, the way it was written in the directive sort of implied that it was a snapshot in time. We are still sort of considering that. We need to look at the data that we have more closely. There's a lot for us to do with the data that we have. So we will probably be following up individually with agencies, particularly for records that we consider to be high priority that are 30 years old or older, and we may, at least for the next year, try and approach it from that perspective. But there may be more for the 30 years old or older permanent records as we sort of digest the big picture of what the data represents. Okay, so first, apologies to the folks on the phone. You'll see this later with the slides, but what we have here is a graphic representation of the 30-year-old or older records response rate. And we'll talk about this one first, Directive Requirement 2.2, and then we'll talk about the unscheduled records. So what you see on this slide, other than a pie chart with a bunch of different colors on it, are a couple of things. One, the good news. We received 115 completed spreadsheets out of a total 267. So that was approximately 43%. Which is a good response rate. It's not great, it's good. We were hoping for better. But in the first year of this activity as part of the RMSA, we can at least work on improving that in FY15. 23% or 63 agencies reported having no records that meet the 2.2 requirement, so they didn't submit a spreadsheet because they said they didn't have any that were 30 years old or older. So we counted that as a response, even though we didn't receive any data. We also had another 42 agencies, or 16%, reported other responses. They didn't have agency resources to complete it. They didn't know if they had them or not, or they were still working on it and it was in progress. So technically we did receive a response. So if you take those two categories with the responses that we completed, then 66% of all the agencies that received the template provided us with some response. So that leaves the bad news, which is category 4, which is the blue section of the pie chart, where we received no response at all. So that's where we're going to have to focus, I think, this year in FY15 and making sure that we can try and raise the number and have a smaller slice in the pie that's blue when we get to working on this with agencies next year and year after. So again, here are the numbers that I just went over. And that takes us to the next slide. So that was just the response rate. This slide covers the volume of records that are 30 years old or older, and it's, again, a much more interesting slide than the response rate. So what this shows is that there are, if I can go to the next slide, 2.3 million cubic feet of records that are 30 years old or older, and this covers both Parts A and Parts B. So these are records that are in the FRC system and records in agency custody that were reported to us. The estimated additional volume is an estimate that we added to the total, and basically what it represents is taking the spreadsheets that we received in Part B and dividing it by the number of those agencies to get an average, and then multiplied that by the agencies that we didn't receive responses for. So it's a way of sort of estimating based on an average of what the other agencies might have reported had they submitted a spreadsheet. So it's a very, very, very rough estimate, but it does sort of fill out the picture a little bit in terms of what we think the volume might be. So it's far from precise, but it does give you a picture of that very big number of records that are 30 years old or older. So one thing that we thought would be interesting, looking at the 30 years old or older records, for both Part A and Part B, and we're looking at Part A on this slide, are the top 5 agencies with the largest volume of records identified in ARCIS, in our system. Top of the list is INS with 390 cubic feet, then Veterans Benefits Administration, 376 cubic feet, Bureau of Indian Affairs, 97 cubic feet, Patent and Trademark Office, about 40,000 cubic feet, and Defense Intelligence Agency at 17,000 cubic feet. So a total of 1.35 million cubic feet in the FRC system. And this, as the note says on the slide, does not include St. Louis, which would be the personnel records. So for Part B, the same stats, and these would be records in agency custody. U.S. Forest Service tops the list at 27,000 cubic feet. National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, 20,000 cubic feet. Department of Justice, specifically FBI, with 55 cubic feet, and at the headquarters departmental level in Department of Justice with 363,000 cubic feet. And then next on the list, Department of Energy, NNSA, and headquarters department level, about 24,000 cubic feet for Department of Energy. And then fifth on the list, NASA, 13,000 cubic feet. So you get the picture. A lot of records out there. So some of the some additional details on the 30 years old or older. So the data reported for this includes both textual and non-textual records. One thing you might be wondering is, how does electronic records fit in? There's not a whole lot of electronic records 30 years old or older, so they are there. And one of the things that we are still in the process of analyzing is what that volume is and what they are in terms of types. The spreadsheet, the way it was reported, there was a drop down for electronic, but it's hard if the data was not put in note fields as to what that data was for us to tell what kind of format it was and what the data was. So we're probably going to be following up with some agencies on that, and hopefully have a clearer picture of what the story is for electronic records 30 years old or older. The volume, the 30 years old or older, is based on the age of the records and not on their eligibility for transfer. So there are a lot of records that are have transfer dates of 50 years or more than 30 years. So it's not based on just the eligible records, it's just based on all records that are 30 years old or older, whether they're eligible for transfer or not. And one of the things that we did notice with the spreadsheets, some agencies did much better jobs, provided more details than others, not surprising. We did try with drop downs to make it as easy as possible, and we'll probably be looking for comments from a lot of you on how we might be able to do better with that in the coming years as we use the similar spreadsheet for unscheduled records. But we did identify some data quality issues that we will use to help fix that reporting template the next time it goes out. And there are some issues that we may need to follow up with agencies to get some clarification on what the spreadsheet and the data actually means. So for the 30 years old or older team, the next steps are to continue to review the data and identify where we need to clarify and which agencies we need to go back to get some additional information. One of the things that we hope to do with the data received from the 30 years old or older is identify some criteria so that we can prioritize those records that are that old and eligible for transfer that we could bring into the National Archives. So as you remember from the requirement, it wasn't to transfer 30 years old or older, it was just to identify those records. So we've gotten to that part where we have identified the records, and we want to be able to use the data to get to the next step, which is we've identified a number of series that are very high priority for the agency and for our stakeholders back in the National Archives and for the public and the researchers that we want to actively work on to see what we can do to move those into the holdings of the National Archives. So what we're going to try and do as part of our work next year in FY15 is work directly with agencies to develop some transfer plans once we've developed the criteria and the prioritization, and then see what we can actually accomplish. Before I turn to unscheduled records, I just wanted to say that if you did have any questions specifically about the 30 years old or older team or permanent records, we do have an email address, permanentrecords at NARA.gov, at which you can send your questions, comments, suggestions, and we're more than happy to take any feedback you have and suggestions you have, and look forward to receiving that and working with you more closely on it. So, switching gears, unscheduled records. So for those of you on the phone, we have another color pie chart that represents the response rate that we've received from agencies on unscheduled records. And I'll go to the next slide so you can see the stats. So the good news is that we did receive 107 completed and submitted spreadsheets. 51 of those agencies did not return a spreadsheet, and they said they didn't have any unscheduled records. Or it was still something that they were working on, it was in progress, and we may have received it by this point, or we expect to receive it soon. So that's the 40%. The bad news, again, is 60% of the agencies who received the template did not provide any response. So again, next year when we send out the unscheduled record spreadsheet, we need to try and move up from 160 agencies and try and get that percentage a bit higher. So the graphic that's up on the screen right now covers types of unscheduled records, and you'll see that the biggest slice of this pie, the blue section, refers to textual records. So not really a big surprise. I mean, we know that there's a lot of paper, not only in the Record Center, but in agencies, and it's, I guess, pretty much expected that number is as high as it is. So other record types that we have that were documented in the Part B, so this is records that are in agency custody, not in the record system. 3,300 textual series of records, 1,750 and change of electronic record series, 725 mixed series, so it includes paper, electronic, non-textual, 18 series of motion and photographs, and 10 series of maps and charts. So just to give you an idea of the types of unscheduled that we're looking at in agencies. For the electronic series, the agencies that are reporting the highest volumes of those unscheduled electronic series are the National Guard Bureau with 633 series, GSA, 351 series, DOJ Headquarters, 126 series, and EOUSA, 111 series of electronic records that are unscheduled. So we may become knocking on those doors if you're not already in contact with us to schedule those records. So again, like with the other team, wanted to give you a sense of the next steps that we are considering as we review the report of the 2.5 unscheduled records team. The first thing we're going to do is share the individual agency reports with your appraisal archivist. What we're going to try and do is get them familiar with the data, and then at some point in the coming months in FY15, we will see what we can do to work with you proactively to address these unscheduled records, either by developing schedules or coming up with plans for how to proceed in doing so. Other things we thought about that we would try and get rolling in FY15, perhaps sooner, is develop a webinar on inventorying records. I mean, we all know this is the first step if you've got a lot of unscheduled records, is you've got to do some inventory and find out what you have so that you can get them on schedule. So one of the things that we thought might be useful is if we did a webinar, and we've done a number of, I think, very helpful, useful webinars in the past couple of years, is actually get one on inventorying records and record it, get it up on NARA's YouTube channel, and make it available for everyone who needs it when they need it. The other thing that we'd like to do, and maybe we will do this as part of a BRIDG meeting, is sharing some of the best practices. We know from the data which agencies have scheduled all of their records and have done an excellent job scheduling their electronic records. So we may call on you, those agencies, to come up and maybe present here at BRIDG with us, maybe do a webinar with us, but maybe try and share some of the practical steps and the lessons learned to make it a little bit easier in terms of process for the rest of you who are need to inventory and schedule your records. So those are just a couple of things that we feel very good about doing and offering. We have some other things that we're considering as part of the report. And by all means, we would love to hear your suggestions, feedback. Email us directly. I would suggest contacting your appraisal archivist if you have ideas along those lines, and let us know what you think would be useful. So that is my last slide. So I think with that, I'm going to go over and join Don at the table, and then we'll take questions on the RMSA, the SAO report, and project teams 2.2 and 2.5. And we should say that if you do have a question, we have microphone stands in the aisle. And please make your way over to the aisle or have someone pass you a microphone to make sure everyone hears.
I have a couple questions, so you can just cut me off and tell me when I'm taking too much time. With respect to the unscheduled records, we had a lot of schedules at NARA, and of course they've been there for more than a year now, which is a little bit disappointing. And it was never clear to me, and I was not able to make clear by asking people at NARA whether you wanted those on the unscheduled list. It sounds to me from what you're saying now that you were not looking at things but had pending schedules. Is that correct?
The way agencies did respond to the requirement as part of the RMSA is they put usually a note, so they were able to tell us that it was in progress or they were working on it. Technically, they are unscheduled. Until the archivist assigns a schedule, they are considered unscheduled. And I think what we did was, for those schedules or those records where the schedule was pending, we were able to identify them as in progress, and we put them in a different data category. But they technically are not scheduled.
That's what I thought. Anyway, we actually submitted our entire agency. We had done a full inventory, and so it was like the entire agency. And the people above me just basically said, "You're not going to, list the entire agency." Right. So we didn't.
And those schedules do take some time to get done when you're doing a comprehensive. But
sure.
Hopefully, you're getting the monthly reports and you're in contact with your appraisal archivist.
Sure.
Status.
So, with respect to the cloud questions, we have a VPN, which we own. It's all ours, but it is up there. And it's never been clear to me about whether that's cloud or not, but it's becoming clearer that if it's agency-owned VPN, it's not cloud. Is that correct?
I'd have
Glad
to
you got that question.
Yeah, that's a very good question. I don't have a definitive answer for that. That's something I'd have to go take back and do a little research on. It sounds like it could be, but I'd have to get a little more detail on what your exact environment is to make that determination.
Because we just did something within Treasury, and they asked us about cloud, and so we reported our VPN, and their response to us, their recommendations to us were all about the contractor, all about procurement, and that kind of thing. So it seemed to me that, at least with respect to them, they were talking about something different from what I was talking about. I was talking about an agency-owned VPN with no intervening.
There could be an agency-owned cloud. I mean, that could be a private cloud. So there's private cloud, public cloud, hybrid cloud. So without knowing exact infrastructure, it'd be hard to say, but it sounds like it could be a cloud if it's stored,
Again, with both of those questions, I think if we're going to include this in that clarity on both of those questions would be helpful in the future. And the other thing is with respect to whether responses should be coming at the agency level or the bureau level, and also whether SAOs should be assigned at only the agency level, or if the bureaus also have legitimate SAOs responsible to NARA.
So in terms of whether or not there should be SAOs at the bureau level, at the component level, we left that up to the agencies to make that determination. It's
So
always
that's something that would be decided at the department level.
right. It's been decided at the department level, and some agencies actually chose to have SAOs further down, which made sense for their organization. And in some cases, I think that works really well, and I think there was a preference for that. But we did leave it up to the agencies to make the determination based on your structure. And we did put out like an SAO FAQ that kind of gave some direction around that. So looking at size component, it might make sense to have SAOs further down the organization.
But that decision can be made at the department level.
Right.
Thank you.
Don't be shy. It's a small group today.
Yes.
Okay, going once? I'll take a shot. All right.
Yes, sir.
Thanks, Tommy. That's okay.
Hi, good morning, gentlemen. Thank you for your presentation. Let's see here. You guys discussed the various goals on the OMB Memorandum M-12-18. I'm just curious about some other items on the memorandum, such as Go A5, evaluating the feasibility for secure data at rest storage. We'll just start with that one. Is that the what was known as the EFRC? Was that meant to fulfill that intent of the Go on the memorandum?
Yeah, we did sort of a research project on that. We did some analysis, and we have like an internal draft that we've done. We've shared it with senior management, but no future decisions have been made on that yet. It's sort of where we have it right now.
Okay, thank you. As for this Go B2 about creating a community of interest,
Sure. Well, actually, there are two community of interest out there that have been established that we should actually have. We had them here a few weeks ago. I think the past BRIDG meeting we can certainly bring them back again. The Federal Records Officer Network is one that's been formed, and the other one is the ERM, Electronic Records Management Automation Working Group. Both of them have kind of different purposes. The FRON is more records management, basic records management issues. They're doing a lot of work on training, different initiatives, and they have monthly meetings. And I think it's open to anyone who's interested in records management should join that. They have an OMB Max page. The other community of interest that was formed in the last year was the ERM Automation Wiki group. Meg Phillips of our organization, our external affairs liaison, created that one. We've been supporting, our office has been supporting that, and they're doing more technical based, looking at vendors, getting vendor presentations, looking at different technologies, a lot of stuff around our A3.1 goal. So if you're interested more in technology-based stuff, join that one. Both of them have OMB Max as their primary portal, but some also have meetings outside of it, different like monthly sessions. So there are two there. I'd be happy to get information for both of them to you.
and one more, of course, the famous Go B3 regarding the Records Management Occupational Series. The latest that we've heard is that OPM is going to recommend making that a Records and Information Management series. But, of course, the Federal Agency Records officers here in this audience would definitely like to be part of that effort before the second revision of the fly sheet is released.
Right, and they put out one draft, as you know. Probably wasn't exactly perfect, as these are better words for that. So comments were submitted back from us, also on behalf of the Federal Records Council, and we are now, I think Paul Wester, Chief Records Officer, recently met with OPM, and we're expecting to see a second draft soon. I don't know when that's coming out, but I know that is on their radar and is one of their top priorities. So we're all, I think, anxiously awaiting to see the next draft of the OPM series. I know I am.
We have a comment over here. Just for the sake of the people on the phone, I just want to remind everyone to please speak clearly and rather loud into the microphones, because we want to make sure everyone that is just listening, dialing in only, can hear everything that you're saying. Thank you.
My name is Essie Bryant, and I'm the Records Officer at the Overseas Private Investment Corporation. And my question is in reference to the SAO report.
Yes.
And you mentioned that something had been sent out to the agencies. I don't know if it was sent out to the agencies' top level or to the CIOs or who received it. But my question is that information out on the NARA website that we have access to?
We haven't sent anything out yet. For 2014, we haven't sent anything out yet. So we are going to be doing that. We haven't sent anything out yet. So we're still, right now, we're wrapping up 2013. We're getting ourselves organized for 2014. And once we have the template finalized and done, we'll send that out along with, like we did last year, with the communication describing the start date, the end date, kind of saying basically reporting period open, here it is. And we haven't done that yet, but we'll make sure that announcement is clear and it's out to everyone, and we cast as wide as possible, make sure everyone's aware of it. We haven't done it yet.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, well, we thank you for bearing with us, those of you on the phone and everyone here in the room. I think we'll turn it back over to David to introduce the next speaker.
Thank you very much, Lawrence. Thank you, Don. So next up on the agenda is Jeff Lunsford. Jeff, again, is the Chief Financial Analyst for the Federal Records Center program. And while we're in the midst of rates development, not yet final, but we want to give you a slight preview as to where we are and the path for sharing that information with all of our customers of the Federal Records Centers program. Jeff.
Good morning. For the benefit of the people on the phone, I have no slides, so no need to worry about whether or not you're missing anything. And as a side note, I actually have no notes. One of my colleagues suggested to me that there's some benefit to be derived from not putting anything in writing when we're talking about rates or money. I assure you that was not my motivation. I'm called to speak publicly occasionally, professionally usually. And a couple years ago, I actually had notes. I had bullet points on index cards, and I thought this would be great. So I'll never get lost, and I'll make sure I hit all my points. And of course, I got lost. The cards got mixed up, and I was really confused, and I was stammering and stuttering, and then there were cards flying everywhere, and it was horrible. So I decided I'm never doing that again. So I'm speaking extemporaneously. I'm speaking to you from my knowledge, from my heart, to talk to you about the FY15 rates. As most of you probably know, Congress established the Federal Records Center Revolving Fund in the FY2000 appropriation. That sort of transformed our organization. So when they established that law, they put some fairly stringent restrictions on the way we are able to operate. First, they required that our customer base be limited to federal agencies and instrumentalities of the federal government, which includes Guam and the Indian reservations and the DC government, that sort of thing. They also relieved federal agencies of the requirement to use the Record Center program to store and service their records, so that every federal agency has the opportunity to go to the private sector for their storage. So they added a layer of competition there for us. They also told us that we had to fully cover our expenses through revenue that we generate using interagency agreements. In other words, we have to not only cover the cost of our staff and our rent, but also the cost of our HR support and our the lawyers and our IT infrastructure and all that stuff that sort of most federal programs don't necessarily have to budget for. We actually have to budget for that, and we have to build that into our rates. Congress also gave us $22 million in sort of a seed money, a starter fund for cash. That helps us cover our monthly expenses, gives us a little bit of float so that we can pay our employees while we're waiting to accept the money from each of our customers through their invoice payment process. So the last little kicker was that they told us that we were allowed to retain revenue in excess of expenses up to 4%. And I'm going to try really hard not to use the word profit because it's not profit. What they said was anything up to 4% in excess of your expenses can be reinvested in fact, must be reinvested into the program. You have to use that money to build ARCIS, or to buy shelving for a new record center, or to bolster your sort of infrastructure. Your capital expenses must be covered from that retained earnings. I'm proud to say that I've actually been at the National Archives since 2000. I've been in my current capacity since 2005. We have never exceeded that 4% cap. If we did exceed the 4% cap, we'd have to return the excess funds to the Treasury to offset the national debt, which I think is $16 trillion now. No way we would ever earn that much money, so no hope there. We've also never lost money, which means that we've been in this really, really nice sweet spot for at least 15 years. There was 1 year where there was some sort of strange accounting adjustment that happened at the end where it made our reports look like we actually lost money, but that wasn't as a result of direct operations. That was sort of an adjustment that they had to make. I'm not sure I even understand what happened there, but proud to say that as a result of the rates and the workload, we earn sufficient revenue every single year to cover our expenses, but not so much that we ever have to sort of apologize for overcharging our customers, which I would hate to do. So all those factors combined mean that we have to be the best value. We have to be extremely efficient in our operations. We have to get our pricing right. We have to have a good crystal ball to project what workload is coming our way. And when we add all of that up, we get something like $185 million in revenue, and we spend something like $181 or $180 million to make all that happen. It's a phenomenal example, in my opinion, of all of our federal agencies coming together, pooling our money, and building something that's greater than the sum of the whole. The whole is whatever that is. Whole is greater than the sum of its parts. So there's a couple of ways that we really drive that efficiency. One of which, and probably the backbone of the Record Center program, is the employees that work in the record centers themselves, storing and servicing your records, hands on the boxes, shelving it or pulling it for reference. All of our employees in that capacity are on production standards. We measure their activity. We have them report billable hours just like a lawyer would. And we give them incentives for high productivity. That really drives the work that they do on behalf of you and for us, to really make sure that there isn't any sort of waste or unused labor or excess labor. Our hiring practices are streamlined so that we can actually get the right number of employees in the right place at the right time to respond to the workload. We watch the cost of our leases very carefully. It's a major expense for us. I think we spend $65 million in rent every single year. And when we do need to expand, we look for low-cost options. We have palletized storage facilities in a couple locations for when it's appropriate to store your records on pallets. We do so. We have recently opened up another underground record storage facility in the Kansas City area. Underground storage can be extremely beneficial in terms of cost, not only from the rent perspective, but also from utilities. That's been proven successful both in Lenexa and Lee's Summit, but we're expanding that in Kansas City also. So we really take our mission seriously. We hear very strongly, and we support the mandate that we get from Congress, that we have to be the best value in government in terms of record storage, and I believe we deliver that. So that sort of lays out the groundwork and introduces the concept that our prices have to cover our expenses, but they really can't exceed our expenses. I mean, there's that very fine margin of 4% where we just have to get it right. So the good news is that we don't anticipate any new major expenses in FY15. That's not talking about the rates. I'm talking about our internal operating expenses. We're at at a place in the sort of the maturity of the program or in the growth of the program where we have sort of come over the mountain when it comes to upgrading our facilities or replacing our facilities to meet the 2009 storage requirements. That was a law that went into effect that required that federal records be stored in certain environmental conditions with certain protections against fire and other catastrophes. And there were certain of our legacy facilities that just didn't match or didn't meet those standards. So we had to go through a long process of replacing some of our facilities, upgrading our facilities, and I'm pleased to say I don't know that every single storage bay in the record centers has been rubber stamped as compliant yet, but I can report that most of our major capital expenses related to the upgrades are behind us. So that really sort of gives us a little bit more of that financial stability, predictability that we've been striving for. We do still have some capital expenses that we're budgeting for. Certainly we've just decided to invest in some upgrades to ARCIS. Most of those are internal. They're not necessarily customer-facing upgrades, but they will integrate some databases and sort of eliminate some of the manual processes that go on behind the scenes so that there's a little more efficiency for us, which results in lower cost and avoids future rate increases for you. I meant to say that, when Congress gave us that $22 million as seed money, we use that as float. We add to it using that retained earnings, that 4%, and then we spend it down through capital expenses. I'm pleased to say that in the last 15 years, that fund has grown to, I think, $28 million. So we're not necessarily a cash cow when it comes to a federal fund. But I think that's, again, a testament to the value that we deliver and the careful financial management that we bring to the table. So for FY15, as David said, the rate development, rate analysis process is underway. We do hope to present an initial package to the CFO sometime in August, and we do anticipate that sometime in September the rates will be published. The areas that we are sort of focusing on this year are, well, there's a couple, and I should say that in an ideal world, we would be able to establish a rate for every single product that is exactly 4% or 3% higher than our expense for that product. The finances, while they're clean, are not that precise. In essence, we sort of take that 4% profit at the fund level and not at the product level. I do try to steer our rates so that each product recovers its own expenses, but we're not there yet. One of the product lines that we are trying to do that with is non-textual disposal. It's an area in the Record Center program that has not received as much attention as it probably needed in the past couple of years, and we have refocused on that recently. We have a national non-textual disposal contract, and that non-textual records eligible for disposal are probably not a major volume out there for any one customer, but we do have this national contract in place, and we are able to begin this non-textual disposal process in earnest. So that's the good news. The bad news is that the contract came in at significantly higher than the rate that we had on the published fee schedule. So that is something that we are going to have to look at and probably come up with maybe a sizable increase. Again, it's not a broad spectrum rate like storage of temporary records. It's fairly focused in terms of its impact. But that is one area that we are looking at. Certainly, we need to make sure, and we take very seriously, the storage and service of classified records. We need to make sure that the extra expense that is associated with the storage and service of classified records is recovered through the rates. So that is something that we do look at. And then we always take great care in looking at the storing and servicing of official military personnel folders in St. Louis. Again, that affects a narrow portion of our customers, primarily the DoD services. But that is something, because it's such an important business line, not only for our customers, but for us internally too, that we need to make sure that that is fully cost recoverable. So similar to the last 2 years, I'm not anticipating a broad spectrum sort of rate increase. I think the last 2 years we pretty much kept all of the major rates flat. I think there were one or two sort of focused areas, like I was saying, for this year, that did receive rate increases in 2014 and 2013. But to a large degree, we've been able to keep the rates flat. And I anticipate something similar. Maybe not a rate freeze as we have in the past, but lacking any significant cost increases. I don't anticipate some sort of traumatic 5 or 10% rate increase. That said, and notwithstanding, if there are significant discrepancies between our cost and the rate that we're charging currently, it's my responsibility to raise that rate. And to the extent that there are sort of general cost increases, and I don't anticipate that there are, but to the extent that they do come up, it again is my responsibility to increase those rates. So in terms of the impact on your individual interagency agreement, I think it's probably safe. A safe budgeting bet would be to estimate a 2 to 3% increase just in the rates. Hopefully it won't be near that much, and if it's down to 0, I declare that success, because that means that we're doing a good job managing our own internal operations, and that I have a very clear crystal ball. But also that means that reduces the impact on your own budget. So to the extent that you have additional workload, if you have a large transfer that you anticipate executing in 2015, you need to add that to your estimate. So your bill might go up by 10%, 0% from the rates, and 10% due to workload, or 2% and 8%. So it's we do try to do some crystal ball gazing and projecting in terms of workload for each customer, but certainly your business lines better than we're able to for all 200 customers. So do take a look at the data. I do plan on sharing our projections with you, but hopefully we're entering an era where there's a lot of stability, both in terms of our own internal expenses, but also in terms of the rates that we're charging to the customers. I think that's good news. I hope it's good news. It seems like good news to me. So we do anticipate getting a signed rate package, as I said, sometime in September, hopefully early to mid-September. And I'm sure you'll be hearing from Gordon Everett and his crew. They'll approach you with the new terms and conditions. I don't think there's any major changes there. We'll have the new rate schedule and financial projection, so that we can begin that interagency agreement approval and signature process. And hopefully October 1st we'll be up and running. Are there any questions? Well, I thank you very much. I'll be around here for the remainder of the program if you do want to meet me down at the bottom. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. And again, we're looking forward to having hopefully flat rates with minor increases this point forward. Just as a quick side note, as Jeff said, we had, I guess, from the perspective of the 15 years as a revolving fund, the most stressful period just in the last few, as we did all those major moves. With those now behind us, we're hoping for a period of stability for the foreseeable future, but we again hope to have the rates out soon and look forward to having signed, executed interagency agreements thereafter. Our next speaker and final speaker for this morning is Gary Ralphus. Gary is brand new to the National Archives as the Director of the Records Management Training Program, so this is your opportunity to get to know Gary and for Gary to get to know you. So let me welcome Gary to the podium.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to join all of you. I'll take just a couple of minutes to kind of give you a little introduction to me and my background, and I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about a couple of those other items in the directive, 2.3 and 2.4. So I think we were sandwiched in there with Lawrence a little bit. So I've come primarily out of the Department of Defense as my background. I've been doing training since about 1987. In a more formal sense since about 1999, with the last few years really focused on online learning. So that kind of marries up with, I think, some of the initiatives that you've been seeing in the training program already at NARA, and certainly gives us a place to move the program forward in the future. The couple months I've been here, I've really spent a lot of time in the classroom with many of you, going through the classes, understanding what we're currently doing. And next week I'll present a plan to my boss about where I think the program should be going in the future. And then we'll hopefully roll that out to you with his approval in the coming months about where the training program will go and how we can best meet your needs with records management training. So to the directive, item 2.3, records officers in completion of your certificate. We did a poll about 4 weeks ago to see kind of where we were in progress. And we're about at 52% complete. 48 didn't respond to us along the way. So I would ask you all to go back to your organizations, take a look. If your records officers are not going to go through the process of completing the courses, there is the route to get an exemption or an exception. We'd ask that you get those to us soon. I know in the original memorandum we had 1 December as the deadline for some of that. What I'd hope is that we can get them sooner, because if I get 100 on 1 December, I don't know that we're going to be able to turn those around for you in as timely a manner as we'd like to. So sooner is better than later for us in terms of making sure you meet that requirement. And if there's help you need getting folks registered for those classes, by all means let us know. In anticipation of that, we added more classes in College Park in October and November. So I think we were up to 3 or 4 complete series here locally that folks can take those classes to meet the requirement. We also expanded the class size. We did that already starting in July, so we've gone from 30 in a class up to 45. Again, trying to make sure we're providing ample opportunity to folks that need that training. We've also met with the Federal Records Officer Network in terms of item 2.4 in directive, which is training that you're required to do inside your agency by the end of this year. So the FRON is working on kind of a standardized package that they're putting together. We've given them a little bit of design guidance and help with that. I'll be meeting with them on the 19th in kind of an all-day working session to work through, can we get to the ground of actually writing a lot of this training out. If you're not connected with them and you don't have a training package, that may be a place to look to meet your requirement initially, and then you can always circle back around and look at doing revisions or doing something else for your organization that's more tailored to your needs. But so in terms of those 2 requirements, I think we're moving in the right direction. I certainly look forward to meeting all of you in person and looking at your needs for training in your organizations if you need assistance. And that's kind of what I'd like to close with today, is that, if you have a particular training requirement or something you're looking at doing, or you'd like someone to look at, how are we going to execute it? Can we get some assistance with thinking about the best design for meeting our people's needs and learning? By all means, that's why I'm here. So contact me. I'll be happy to set up a time where we can talk, or potentially even come out to your organization to look at what you're doing, see how we can make improvements or meet the needs that you have for records management training in your organizations. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. And
Is it on? Good morning. Welcome to NARA. Thanks for coming. About the exceptions, you said you have a 52% response rate so far. Is that published somewhere, or will you be responding to agencies who gave you requests for exceptions or something of that nature? Though I'm asking because I did submit one, but I haven't heard back. So is there a way I can check that it's been?
Absolutely. I would ask you to submit it again to me.
Okay.
Because to the best of my knowledge, and I'll go back and double track, to the best of my knowledge, we have processed everything we received.
Okay.
So that either means you didn't get notification back and we actually did run it through, or somehow we never got it in the process. So let's make sure we close the loop,
Okay,
and we'll
that's
get
fair.
that taken care of for you.
Thank you.
All right. Well, no other questions? Again, similar to, I'll be standing here if you, oh, another one?
Yeah, hi, Darius Taylor, Department of Health and Human Services Records Officer. In terms of the deadline, December 31st deadline, is that for new individuals as well? Because I thought that, you know, that was a year. You have a year once you come on.
Right. So if you have a records officer that is new to your organization, once they've been designated, they have 12 months from that designation to meet their requirement. So if they've come in during this year, then the December 31st deadline wouldn't apply to them. It would be that 12-month window for the folks that have come in new.
Thanks.
All right. Well, if you have other questions, I'll be standing by too, and happy to meet all of you individually. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And again, thanks to all of you for attending. That concludes this BRIDG program for today. A reminder that the meet and greet that's usually held after the program or in the afternoon when we have the BRIDG meeting has been postponed for this cycle, so we'll resume that when we meet again next time. Thanks so much for everyone for coming out today. Thank you.